Is this your king? Huh? Is this your king?
What up, everybody? It's Frank Mula back at it again with another video today. You're watching Level Up, Double Down, where we don't play around unless it's video games. Now, as a reminder, we're currently on the road to 1,000 subscribers, and with that being said, this endeavor requires your utmost support. So if you like the type of content I make and you want to see more, like the video and subscribe to the channel. That's all I ask, and I hope I can earn your support today. And if you're already subscribed, then I want to express my deepest appreciation for your gesture. So with that out the way, let's go ahead and get things started. So what I have in front of me is something that I thought was too good to be true. And I came across it quite a few times while perusing through AliExpress's website during a couple of their online sales, and it piqued my curiosity because of its price point alongside its technical specifications, and I figured by buying it at the tender price of $88.20 all in, what more do I have to lose? So, on today's episode, I'll be reviewing for you today the KTC H27D9 27-inch QHD IP monitor. So the manufacturer is a company called KTD, which stands for Key to Combat, whatever that means. And their motto is technology improves life, which sounds kind of generic, but that's beside the point. And to nobody's surprise, they're headquartered out of China. Now, 10 years ago, I never thought I'd see the day where 1440p monitors would become this affordable at a price point within reach for the average person. But as time has passed, manufacturing breakthroughs coming out of China have allowed for certain electronics such as monitors, which were normally cost prohibitive, to become commonplace on the affordability scale due to their hyper-efficient manufacturing processes and economies of scale. Now, I bought this monitor at the beginning of May, and I'm just now getting around to looking at it. Keep in mind that I got mine at a time during one of AliExpress's sales, and they tend to have plenty of them throughout the year. Although I did purchase this monitor on AliExpress, additionally, it can also be had on both Amazon and Newegg. However, it'll cost you a bit more, currently at $130 to be exact. But at that price, it starts to compete with other monitors from more well-established, reputable brands like Acer, which I don't consider to be worth it at that price point. So, if you're in the market and do plan to buy one of these, I'd suggest holding off until they go on sale on AliExpress, which at this current time they are, using their discount promo code SSUS14 at checkout, which was how I bought mine. But with the current price being $109.71 and with the $14 discount applied, you won't be getting it for as low as I did. Just to give you guys a heads up, I caught the FedEx delivery driver right outside my house as soon as it was being delivered, and lo and behold, no external boxes being used to ship the monitor in, so you'll only be receiving it in the same condition it came out of the factory. So, if you do plan to buy this monitor from AliExpress, definitely keep that in mind if you prefer to preserve the original contents in the original box, or to avoid it becoming a target of porch pirates who might see the perfect opportunity to take it as soon as it arrives. Overall, the shipping delivery speed was pretty fast since it only took 3 days after I ordered it on May 6th. But the best part about that process was that it shipped from within the US while not coming all the way over from China. Since my last video where I reviewed a monitor, I actually took the time and opportunity to review all the questions that the commenters fielded me with, and I internalized all that feedback I received to put this video together. Now, before we proceed, just so you guys know, full disclaimer, I paid for this monitor with my own funds, and I'm not being paid to review it, nor am I being sponsored for this video. All the opinions I express here are my own, and no one's influencing this review that I'll be providing, nor seeing it ahead of time, so there's no shilling on my part. So with that out the way, let's go ahead and get this review started. Alright, so here's what all comes included in the box, which is as follows. One 27-inch monitor / panel, the monitor stand itself, a quick start guide, an HDMI cable, a warranty card, and lastly, the power adapter. While putting this monitor together, I'm not gonna lie, it felt kinda cheap, especially the monitor stand, so let me explain. Now, you don't have anything to worry about as it relates to the stand holding up the panel securely. However, don't expect to be able to adjust the height since the manufacturer clearly didn't intend to include that as an option. The good news is the monitor can tilt at least, which is adjustable between -5 degrees and +15 degrees. Also, the plastic housing encasing the panel wasn't as sturdy as I would have liked, and it felt kind of flimsy, but I'm pretty sure you've all heard the saying, you get what you pay for, so there's that. Take notice to the rigidity of the panel as I attempt to somewhat flex it. In addition to what I had mentioned earlier, the main reason for this monitor's claim to fame, aside from its price point of $90 and max resolution of 1440p, is its overall refresh rate of 120 Hz. Now, from what I gathered, there's a caveat to that, which is you'll have to overclock the monitor to achieve that refresh rate, but natively, it maxes out at 100 Hz. So, later in this video, we're going to put that to the test. I'm going to attempt to overclock this monitor to determine if the manufacturer's claims are true, all in the name of science. Speaking of specs, the ports that come included on this monitor are as follows. 1 DisplayPort 1.4B, 2 HDMI 2.0 ports, and a headphone jack. Now, due to this monitor only offering up to 1440p resolution with a refresh rate of 120 Hz, it doesn't support HDMI 2.1 for those of you wondering. And before you ask, this monitor does not offer a Type-C port, since that would easily cause the price of this monitor to increase. And no, this monitor does not have built-in speakers, which is another cost-saving measure, since a lot of the times, the speakers that come included on monitors tend to have lackluster performance and are an earsore due to their very tinny sound and minuscule projection, and I never use them anyway, so there's that. For your convenience, I'll be posting specs of this monitor on screen so you guys have a better idea regarding what's on offer when comparing it to other monitors. So take a moment to pause the screen if you need more time to review this information. So, after taking a look at the monitor's product page, it does show that this monitor is compatible with adaptive sync technologies such as AMD FreeSync Pro and G-Sync with 1 milliseconds of response time for reduced latency and increased gameplay smoothness, while the 120 Hz refresh rate is in use. But unfortunately, this monitor doesn't appear to support variable refresh rate, VRR, or auto low latency mode, ALLM, as a feature. Now, I don't own any modern day consoles since I primarily game on PC, but if you do experience any noticeable judder or stuttering while using this monitor, it would be highly advisable to turn off those two settings while playing on current generation consoles. Also, while playing on consoles, HDMI port number 2 is a suggested option to use, which offers 1440p at 100 Hz support. And lastly, enabling game mode in the monitor's on-screen display can prevent unnecessary image processing like noise reduction and motion interpolation. With that being said, the gameplay responsiveness of this monitor not only outperforms most TVs at this price point, but the sharpness and color fidelity is still retained in this monitor's presentation. Although this monitor does offer HDR10 as a feature to help improve dynamic range and enhance shadow detail, I wouldn't take it too seriously since the output produced doesn't compare anywhere near the performance of OLEDs. The peak brightness of this monitor maxes out at around 300 nits and there's no local dimming. Now, you may be going into this thinking that the brightness of 300 nits is too dim for your use case. However, I beg to differ and I argue that notion. Case in point, the overall brightness only really matters if you plan to use this monitor in direct sunlight, which is highly unlikely, so most, if not all, indoor conditions won't affect your ability to use this monitor. I could see if you made the same case for a smartphone, since most flagship cell phones tend to go up to at least 1,000 nits or more in peak brightness, because that's what users come to expect, being able to see their screen in all different type of outdoor scenarios. But for a PC monitor, not so much. And plus, the monitor's overall lower peak brightness level, or lack thereof, contributes to its lower price tag, so it becomes a less expensive option as a result. So yeah, you can't have it both ways. OLED aspirations while paying dramatically less than OLED prices. Alright guys, so let's put this monitor to the test and run it through its paces. To demonstrate, I'll be using one of my modded GameCubes, which connects via HDMI by way of an adapter made by Retrobit. And also, I'll be using two different PCs. The first one is my Hackintosh, which boots into Mac OS, and the other one is the most recent PC rig that I built this past February, which I provided a cost analysis for as presented on video. So if you haven't seen that video yet, you can check it out right at the top. Just to bring you guys up to speed if you're not familiar, that PC contains a 9900X running alongside a 9070 XT on 48 gigabytes of DDR5 RAM. Now, to lay out some ground rules, I'll be running everything at 1440p as much as possible, as long as that option is available. Also, everything is going to be ran to the max, that being ultra to high settings at native resolution, so there will be no upscaling involved. That means I will not be turning down any of the settings for each of the games on display in an effort to show their performance unfiltered, and in order to make my presentation representative of what your experience should look like if you were to buy this monitor. So with that all being said, let the games begin. First off, let's take a look at the monitor's OSD settings menu by using the nub or the black joystick with the power button located on the back of the panel to access it in order to switch some of the settings on the fly. During this part of the process, I'll be using my Hackintosh to showcase the results on Mac OS as I make changes to the monitor's internal settings. Now, if you haven't seen my video where I went into detail about how I was able to customize this Mac, you can check it out right at the top. Now, let's speak in terms of productivity workflows. That includes photo editing, using Photoshop, browsing the internet, or data entry within Microsoft Word, for example. According to the product specs, the display utilizes 99% of the sRGB wide color gamut for color accuracy. This monitor should check all the boxes if you create content. The colors look pretty natural from what I can tell based on the default settings, so if the lack of color accuracy is a deal breaker, then you won't have anything to worry about when it comes to saturation. Since my last video where I reviewed a monitor, one common concern that caught my attention were questions surrounding the prevalence of blurriness, specifically as it relates to text on screen. The reason for blurriness is very simple. For example, say you want to display content on screen, but the source of that content is at a resolution of 720p. However, if the monitor you're using has a higher pixel density, meaning it natively supports a resolution higher than the source of the content you're displaying. For example, let's say 1440p to help things make more sense. If you do the math, the source of the content you're trying to display is twice as small as the screen it's being viewed on. So, in essence, you're stretching out the pixels of the image on a much larger surface area on a monitor which is technically native to 1440p, not 720p. And this monitor contains a lot more pixels, twice as many to accommodate the image at 720p. So, one suggestion I would recommend would be to retain the monitor's native resolution at 1440p, but adjust the input resolution for the source of the content you're trying to display so that it closely matches the resolution of the monitor's native output. A lot of the times, adjusting the display settings within your OS so that it scales properly will address this issue as well. Aside from that, there's not much you can do to change the output, since that result is inherent whenever you're displaying a lower resolution image on a monitor with a higher native resolution. Now, due to this being an IPS panel, it will exhibit some minor backlight bleed, but that's an inherent flaw of any IPS panel. I have mine set to the default brightness level, which is at 55, and it hasn't been distracting for me at all. Also, from my vantage point, I didn't notice any kind of dirty screen effect, which is a plus. And before any of you guys ask, no, my monitor did not show any signs of dead pixels out of the box, so let's get that out the way. Now, transitioning over to PC, let's start off by attempting to overclock the monitor in order to set the refresh rate to 120 Hz, since that function had no effect when I tried it out on the Mac, in air quotes, within the OSD menu settings. So, First, we need to log into Windows, and after doing so, we need to use that small black joystick on the back of the monitor, which also acts as a power button, which allows us access to the OSD settings menu, and navigate to the overclock setting under the advanced settings menu option to ensure it's already enabled, and if not, enable overclock, which will cause Windows to revert to the lowest refresh rate available. And lastly, we want to go to Windows settings, then system, then display, then scroll down to advanced display, and under choose a refresh rate, change it to 120 Hz. That should result with your monitor's refresh rate outputting at 120 Hz. Alright, so we've made it to the part of the video you've all been waiting for, the games. Let's start things off with Resident Evil Requiem. As I had mentioned earlier, all the games are being ran at max settings. This is in an effort to unleash the monitor's full potential. Aside from that, the color mode being used from the monitor's internal menu is set to sRGB, and of course, the overclock is being applied, allowing it to run at 120 Hz. Everything else within the monitor's settings has been set to default. So far, the average frame rate has been pretty steady for the most part, fluctuating between the low 100s and 120 frames per second. Overall, the gameplay feels pretty smooth without any noticeable dips in performance. Not sure if you guys have been paying attention throughout my time playing this game, but this monitor has been the bottleneck for the GPU in use, the 9070 XT. Just keep in mind that you'll be leaving performance on the table if you plan to use this monitor alongside the 9070 XT or other similar high-end GPUs. Next, we'll be looking at Forza Horizon 6. Now, for my last video on the channel, I ran benchmarks for Forza Horizon 6 on 3 different PCs, and I broke them down in detail, so if you haven't seen that video yet, you can check it out right at the top. Now, I really don't think I need to explain myself, since I think this game's overall performance while using this monitor speaks for itself. You would think that running a fast-paced racing game would cause screen tearing on a monitor of this caliber, but that was far from the case. As you can see, the frame rate was consistent throughout my whole gameplay session at around 120 frames per second, and there was no noticeable input lag that I could pick up on either. And if you're like me and despise any kind of resolution upscaling, well, it definitely wasn't necessary to achieve a reasonable frame rate to the point where the monitor couldn't keep up. Now, the next game in the lineup I'll be presenting to you today is Mafia: The Old Country, but the game's performance itself left a lot to be desired. Although I came into this game without any expectations, it was hard for me to fathom how mediocre the frame rate would get at times after witnessing the performance of the other 2 games prior, which was no fault of this monitor. Just to make that clear, to be more specific, the game ran with the frame rate that would dip into the low to mid 50s and hover all the way up to the low 70s throughout most of the time I spent playing it. There was constant judder and inconsistencies that interfered with my gameplay, and what makes it much more egregious is when you take into account that most of what was played during my gameplay session wasn't all that involved, nor was there much action to warrant such lackluster performance. I think this game could have highly benefited from a bit more optimization, but that's just my opinion, which is neither here nor there. So, in an effort to see how well this monitor handles 2D sprites, I decided to throw in a 2D game title to test that out, which happens to be Mortal Kombat Legacy Collection, specifically Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3, which is running through Digital Eclipse's in-house emulator. Not that this game could take advantage of the monitor's features, such as the 120 Hz refresh rate, but I was inclined to show how well this monitor presents an animated 2D side-scroller on screen for those of you who are into those type of games. And also, Mortal Kombat happened to be one of my favorite fighting game franchises growing up. I didn't even bother wrestling with any of the settings, since the lack of graphic textures or polygonal characters would make that a futile effort. However, for whatever reason, my gameplay would stay capped at 55 Hz the entire time, and I'm assuming VSync must have been applied by default in the game settings to limit the refresh rate past that point. Now, that in itself did not ruin the gameplay experience for me, since I was able to accurately time my movesets and execute them without encountering any noticeable input lag or unresponsiveness caused by latency. But I thought this would be something worth sharing if you're considering playing this game or any other 2D side-scroller for that matter while using this monitor. Lastly, moving on to GameCube. So I decided to go this route because, for one, I don't own a current generation console, and nowadays they're just gaming PCs with limitations and are locked down to a specific platform. For all intents and purposes, I wanted to introduce retro gaming into the mix because it can be sort of a wild card. What I mean by that is this: more often than not, when you connect a retro gaming console to use on a higher resolution display, such as its monitor, inevitably it will produce a lower resolution image compared to the native output of that monitor. What comes with that is a mismatch in aspect ratios, meaning that the source of the image, being the retro gaming console, will appear to take up a smaller surface area of the screen compared to the available screen real estate of the monitor, and as a result, it causes a series of black bars to show up around the image. This is called letterboxing when they appear at the top and bottom, pillar boxing when they appear on the left and right side, or window boxing when the black bars cover all four sides. Rather than stretch, distort, or crop the source of the image, the monitor adds these black bars around the image to preserve the correct aspect ratio while retaining the image's original proportion. For those of you who are unaware, after modding the GameCube, a popular firmware to use, which happens to be preferred by the retro gaming community, is called Swiss, and it allows for the use of homebrew and other applications on your GameCube, which offer functionality other than what is originally designed for by the manufacturer, which is Nintendo in this case. But the overall fundamental benefit of using Swiss are the quality of life improvements it provides. One of those quality of life features that has become very beneficial is the enforcement of the 16:9 wide aspect ratio. If you notice during my gameplay session, as I continue to proceed from one screen to the next, the monitor would change resolution in between screen transitions, which in itself affects the screen aspect ratio being displayed on the monitor. This is an inherent side effect of retro gaming, especially if you're attempting to display content that was specifically designed for that 4:3 aspect ratio while running it on a 16:9 monitor. During my experience testing out this monitor while running the GameCube, a lot of the times the resolution it produced would end up being 720 by 480, basically 480p, which is 3 times smaller than the native output of this monitor. So the black bars I was talking about earlier represents the empty space that the image doesn't occupy. Now, it doesn't look all that bad or easy to look at in my opinion. However, this concession does have a tendency to cause certain aspects of the image to become much more noticeable, such as jaggies around character models due to the lack of anti-aliasing, which happened to be a creative decision by the game developer at the time of the game's original release, and I presume they had no intention of the game being played at a resolution higher than 480p. As long as the GameCube is connected to a monitor that displays at a resolution higher than the image that the GameCube can produce, such as 720p, 1080p, or 1440p, which is the max resolution that this monitor supports, then that monitor will magnify such flaws which can affect the overall picture quality. Now, let's address the elephant in the room: ghosting. Being that this monitor comes with a decent enough refresh rate of at least 120 Hz, ghosting shouldn't be a problem using this monitor since it has a fast enough response time of 1 millisecond to its credit. Now, I do want to stress that this monitor by no means is meant for competitive online multiplayer gameplay. This monitor doesn't even offer high enough of a refresh rate to play competitively online at 1440p, let alone at 1080p with a 120 Hz refresh rate, and as a result, it introduces delayed reaction time for the user, diminishing any element of surprise you had intended to inflict on your ops while playing online. Although setting the monitor to 120 Hz can help further reduce latency of the panel and eliminate any potential lag in situations where those issues could arise, there are way better monitors out there that will give you more of a competitive edge when playing online multiplayer games. However, they will probably cost you substantially more money, so it's best to keep your expectations in check. Now, you won't have any problems using this monitor to play single-player games that are linear, action-adventure, or open world in nature, since this monitor is better suited for those type of games, especially at 1440p if you prefer to play at high ultra settings while loading high-quality textures. But the stability of your gameplay overall will be dependent upon the graphics card you're using if playing those games on PC. Let's talk about the warranty. Now, I'm not familiar with the manufacturer of this monitor, so when shit hits the fan and you encounter issues affecting its functionality, their customer service may be a crapshoot. Now, from what I've gathered, after checking out the warranty card that came bundled in the box, it specifically states that you'll be granted a 1-year extended warranty on your KTC product, which is better than nothing, I guess. So, who's to say what type of support comes included with the warranty that they offer for the monitor based on its price, and what kind of hoops you would have to jump through in order to get the monitor made, or would they even honor it to begin with? Technically, you're not buying this monitor at your own risk, but at $90, is that a risk you're willing to take? So, just speaking for myself, I haven't heard enough about KTC as a brand to formulate an opinion, nor can I attest to how far any of their products have been battle tested to determine their quality assurance and whether the company stands behind their warranty if you have to file a claim. But at $90, I'm willing to throw caution to the wind and let Jesus take the wheel, since I think it's worth the risk in my humble opinion, but you're free to make whatever decision you consider reasonable based on your risk tolerance. So in summary, I must say, the picture quality looks pretty good for what you get as far as I could tell, all things considered. What makes this monitor great is that it supports resolutions up to 1440p with a refresh rate of 120 Hz, which requires that you overclock the monitor, but natively, it maxes out at 100 Hz. However, I'm satisfied with my purchase because I bought it at a reasonable price of $90, and I think this monitor is a type that fits the bill and works within anyone's budget, so you'll be surely getting a whole lot of bang for your buck. This monitor itself was purpose-built to work on a variety of platforms, whether that be on Xbox Series, PS5, and even older generation consoles compatible with HDMI, but overall, it's primarily compatible with PC. Speaking of which, if you're considering using this monitor as a daily driver for productivity, then you may want to configure the monitor within the internal settings menu and select standard or sRGB color modes and avoid game or vivid, which can oversaturate blues and reds. So, who would I recommend this monitor to? If you're a casual gamer who doesn't mind lower resolutions below 1440p, or if you like to watch cinematic content such as streaming movies online, this monitor is for you. It offers a decent picture quality and a modest visual presentation at 1440p, 1080p, or 720p for whatever use case that suits your situation. This monitor offers an array of robust settings to accommodate whatever stylization you prefer. For example, HDR, FreeSync, and a variety of color modes, etc. Or you can just leave things at default, which still looks good in my opinion. And one last final note, running the monitor at the highest refresh rate possible at its native resolution should mitigate any instances of ghosting. Bear in mind that the image may appear blurry depending on the source of the image. For instance, on PC, if you have the monitor set too low of a resolution. A lot of the times, clarity of text on screen will be dependent upon the resolution you have set from the source of the image. And as a reminder, since owning this monitor, I have encountered not one dead pixel. Now, I think that about does it regarding most of the topics that I wanted to discuss, so I hope you learned something today. So, as I wrap up this video, feel free to let me know in the comments, what were your thoughts about the presentation I gave? If you're interested in this type of content as it relates to unboxing PC hardware and reviews, hit the subscribe button down below and click the bell icon to turn on all your notifications so you don't miss a thing. And also, if you made it this far into the video, I want to sincerely thank you for watching. So until next time, like, comment, subscribe, and share. Again, this is Frank Mula signing out. Holla at me.